physical meeting location. Members of the public wishing to observe the meeting live may do so at mountainview.legistar.com, on YouTube at mountainview.gov/YouTube, and on Comcast Channel 26. As noted in the meeting agenda, members of the public may provide oral public comments during the public comment periods for an item by joining the Zoom webinar with the webinar ID of 853-0070-5240. Emails and voicemail messages received by 5 p.m. today were forwarded to the EPC. All votes will be taken by roll call vote. Now I'll ask the EPC clerk to proceed with the roll call. Ms. Whitehill?
Commissioner Clark?
Here.
Commissioner Dempsey?
Here.
Commissioner Gutierrez is absent. Commissioner Haymeyer?
Here.
Commissioner Nunez?
Here.
Vice Chair Yin?
Here.
And Chair Cranston?
Here. So we have a quorum. First item on the agenda is the meeting minutes. We will review the minutes from the May 18th, 2022 meeting. First, is there any feedback from commissioners on the minutes? Discussion? Head shakes. Okay. And we'll open it to public comment. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on this item, and specifically the minutes? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Phone users can mute and unmute themselves with *6. The EPC clerk will start the timer and let you know when your time is up. Ms. Whitehill, do we have anyone wishing to speak on the minutes?
No one wishing to speak on the minutes.
We'll bring it back to the commission. And do I have a motion? Commissioner Clark?
I move approval of the minutes.
And Vice Chair Yin?
I will second the motion.
Ms. Whitehill, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
Commissioner Dempsey?
Aye.
Commissioner Gutierrez is absent. Commissioner Haymeyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Nunez?
Aye.
Vice Chair Yin?
Aye.
And Chair Cranston?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Item 4 on the agenda is oral communications. This part of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the EPC on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this section. State law prohibits the Commission from acting on non-agenda items. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comments on the agenda? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Phone users can mute and unmute themselves with *6. EPC clerk will start the timer and let you know when your time is up. Ms. Whitehill, do we have anyone wishing to speak in this section?
No one currently wishing to speak in this section.
Then we'll close public comment, or open session. Next item is a study session regarding a request for a new office building and parking structure at 301 to 381 East Eveline Avenue. We'll begin with a staff presentation from Ella Kirchanian, I hope I pronounced your name right, project planner, and Stephanie Williams, planning manager and zoning administrator.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Chair Cranston and the commissioners. Tonight presentation, we will introduce the project located at 301 East Eveline and outline key questions for EPC. My name is Ella Karachian, as Chair mentioned. So the project is located on the south side of East Eveline between Ferry Morse Way and the State Route 237, and within the Ferry Morse Way precise plan. The site is about 16.6 acres, and the project includes a new 3-story office building and a new 6-level parking structure. The existing site contains 5 2- to 3-story office buildings within the center of the site. and the project is proposing to use 25,000 square feet of LASD and TDRs, Los Altos School District transfer of development rights at this location. The project applicant received authorization from City Council in 2018 to utilize this TDR at this project site to construct the office building and the parking structure. The DRC has reviewed the project in April, and its recommendations are listed in the staff report. There are several topics outlined in the staff report, and I briefly touch base on those today. The project includes amendments to the precise plan, standards for the FAR, height, and setbacks to facilitate the proposed project. The proposed project would result in a site-wide FAR of 0.35 as a result of the TDR transfer, which exceeds the maximum allowed 3.35 under the precise plan. This is the overall site plan, and as you can see, the new office building is on the northeast side, and the proposed parking structure is on the south section of the site. DRC discussed the site plan extensively with the staff and the project applicant, and shared a staff's concern with the location of the proposed driveway between the new building and existing buildings. There were a few recommendations listed in the staff report, and number one was to remove the driveway between the buildings, enhance the ferry Morse way entry to the site, and implement wayfinding throughout the site, especially for people coming from East Eveline. This is the office building design. Staff and DRC generally support the overall design strategy and find the building to be an attractive addition to the site. There were a few recommendations, such as better emphasize focal features such as the main entry, highly visible corners, common open space, and public amenity spaces. This is the parking garage design. The DRC discussion of the garage focused on the proposed perforated metal screening. And there were a few recommendations in the staff report, including refine the perforated aluminum panels installation to create greater visual interest and shadows and movement along the parking garage facade. This diagram shows the location of the proposed heritage tree removal and non-heritage tree removal. As you can see, the red dots shows the location of the heritage trees to be removed, and the black dots show the non-heritage tree removal locations. In overall, the project is going to preserve 88 trees, including 83 heritage trees. And so, as you know, we require trees to be planted at the parking lots, and this project is redeveloping an existing parking lot, and that's why it would result in removal of the trees. And based on the current plans, and the project is proposing to remove 104 trees, 32 to be heritage trees. The staff and DRC recommend to the applicant to study closely change to the proposed paving landscape plan and building footprints to preserve more trees, and also relocate the existing heritage trees on site instead of just removing those trees. This is the existing tree canopy, and as you can see, most of the tree canopies that would be removed is right now within the existing parking lot. And this is the proposed tree canopy, and the applicant is proposing about 94 new trees to be planted. Based on the City of Mountain View requirement, they are required to provide 138 replacement trees, and staff is recommending to increase the number of replacement trees based on the requirement. This is the summary of our questions from the EPC members, and it is also listed in our staff report. And this is the bird's eye view of the project. As you can see, there are existing buildings, and the new building is on the based on this image is on the right side. That would conclude my presentation, and now the applicant would present their presentation at this time. Thank you.
Good evening.
The applicant, Ms.
We're going to share a screen. My name is Joe Newtbar. I'm the development manager for Rockwood Capital, the entity that controls the property here. Bruce Hancock and Wright Sherman from WRNS Studio are here, and they'll be controlling the slides for me. Ella has done a nice job summarizing the project, so we'll move through very quickly on the presentation, but maybe we can provide a little bit of context that'll be helpful as to how we got to where we are today. Next slide, Bruce. We've owned this site for a fairly long time, and it was a series of tilt-up office buildings that were built in the mid-1980s that really were outdated and really not the kind of built product or sort of urban existence that Mountain View has become to be over the years. And so the first goal of the project here was to renovate and enhance what was already there. And so over a number of years, we've been enhancing the existing buildings on site one at a time, and then most substantially recently doing a very significant I should say massive site work and landscape upgrade to really change what this campus has been over the years, from a 1980s suburban office campus to something that's a little bit more vibrant and speaks a little bit more to what Mountain View is today and what urban communities want to be like today. Bruce, can you go to the next slide, please?
We have Bruce.
Hopefully we don't have technical difficulties.
It should be showing the next slide.
Yeah, it's still on the cover sheet. So let's.
Okay, let me redo the share here.
It's okay. Apologize. There we go. Thank you. Very briefly, this is what the site plan has looked like for the last 40 plus years. Next slide. The key there is that in that 1980s tradition, it was really an island of buildings in the middle, surrounded by parking, perimeter parking, and the goal in changing this site has been to provide a little bit more of a usability, walkability, urban interface, and by adding the new building, create a strong urban corner and bringing a building out towards the corner of Ferry Morse and Eveline, as opposed to the historic kind of passive suburban diagram. This diagram just shows kind of broader circulation. The site historically has had 4 entries, vehicular entries, off of East Eveline. We're planning to remove the westerly driveway and simplify the diagram and simplify and create more of an identity of a clear multi-tenant campus with the addition of the new building. Currently, most of the vehicular traffic comes in off of Ferry Morse, primarily because of the 237 off-ramp, which is at the bottom of the screen, and then the East Wistman overpass, which is on the left side, running from the top to the bottom of the screen. And that's where most of the vehicular traffic comes from. But we have an incredible number of users today on site that take Caltrain. We have the MV Go shuttle that services the site, as well as the walkability to the East Westman VTA site. Next slide, Bruce. Again, to sort of give the context again, the first phase, which we've mostly completed, was really about facade improvements, changing what the characteristic of the place looked like, and really changing all of the site work and landscape to create a more vibrant place in which to work and spend time. The phase two that we've been hoping to do for a long time has been the addition of the new building. And so now is the time that we're able to, via the TDR process, have the opportunity to bring this phase to this what we find to be a sort of underdeveloped, overly suburban campus location that has such great adjacency to the mass transit and multiple means of traffic, whether it's bicycle, pedestrian, rideshare, or train and last mile bicycle or MV Go. The site is very well located. Next slide. We have some before and after images just to share some of that context. The existing on the left, beige tilt-up buildings with lots of parking within the campus, kind of dated turf grass landscape, very passive landscape with these sort of hermetically sealed glass window lines that were very unfriendly, no indoor, outdoor. And to the right, we've created these pedestrian-friendly environments, a lot of walkability, people, places, and made the buildings much more engaging and trying to stitch together the pedestrian ground plane to the interior of the buildings, whether it's through bigger openings, bigger windows, clear glass, stairways, penetrations, and so forth. Next slide. These are all examples of what the site looks like today, which is very active, very dynamic, and again, much more of a people place and pedestrian place that has become a more organized campus, albeit a multi-tenant campus, as opposed to, the sort of the Google campuses, which are owner user driven. This is very different here, where we have different tenants in all the buildings. Next slide. These are other examples, visual examples of what we've done with the buildings. Next slide, Bruce. These are diagrammatic, organizational drawings, just showing how we're trying to organize the site. I think it's probably a little bit more detail than we need for tonight. Next slide. And then the site plan, which Ella touched on. And I think it's important to mention one of the DRC recommendations, number one, regarding the driveway, is between the new building on the left-hand side of the page and the very first building in the upper left. There's the cursor, thank you. That drive aisle there, the DRC has recommended that we remove that as a vehicular access point, and we feel quite strongly that we want to maintain that. And part of the reason is that we feel like it's very, very difficult if you come off of Eveline to find the building if there's no vehicular connection. We've decided to get rid of the driveway penetration at the street itself, and in those images with the trellises and the plaza, which happens to be in the center of the site, in the middle of the page, top of the page, that's sort of the organizational ceremonial entry for the site. And if you enter the site at that location, if you can't turn right and circulate to get to the building, it's almost impossible to find your way to the building. You'd have to circulate through parking lots all the way around the perimeter of the campus to find your way to a parking structure before you've ever even seen the building. We're a little bit concerned about identity, delivery, vendors, rideshare, visitors, et cetera, being able to find this building with an East Eveline address. I think what's most confusing is seeing the building at the corner, but then as a user or a visitor, not being able to kind of find the building once you enter the campus. So it's a very important thing that I think we should talk about tonight. And we talked a lot about it at the DRC. And one of the things that came up at the DRC was, how can we improve that what we're calling the RU, the sort of pedestrian promenade that allows vehicles to travel through it, in that section where the cursor is bouncing now, how to enhance that environment so that the landscape is present and significant and feels like a people place, but still allows vehicles to travel through it. Even though we don't feel like this would be the primary access point for vehicles, we think that it's a necessary point of access. We also think that it's probable that the fire department's going to want us to have access on that side of the building, be able to serve the building from two sides. So there are multiple things happening, and it'd be great to talk about that tonight. Next slide. This is just up close views of what we're calling the rue, the sort of promenade between the two buildings would look like in plan, with dynamic paving, planting, and people places. Next slide. The aerial, which you've seen. Next slide. More building. These are examples of things that we're working on in progress with the DRC comments, working on canopies and overhangs and articulation at various moments of the building. So this is all in progress and in response to DRC comments. Next slide. Again, plaza images. Go to the next slide, Bruce, and we can look at the entry very briefly. Working again on canopies, entry, articulation, and other things that we heard from the DRC that we're working on in real time currently with staff. Next slide. Entry, oh yeah, one of the other comments of DRC was moving a trash enclosure, which you'd see on the bottom image to the right. The top image is showing it removed. Again, these are all part of the process that we're going through with DRC, responding to comments and trying to show staff that we're modifying design to show that we're listening to those comments. Next slide, please. Parking structure, Ella touched on this. These are advancements where we're showing more screening, less garage architecture and more texture and relief and so forth. So we're working on that on all four sides of the garage with staff and DRC. Next slide. And other details of trying to create better pedestrian feel to the spaces, in particular that driveway that I touched on prior, that spaces can be pedestrian friendly and also allow vehicles to travel within them. The lower slide we showed to the DRC was sort of a special paving zone with lots of bollards to differentiate. And the upper image is where we are today with special paving, but a lot more planting, planter pots, and a much more landscape engaged definition of the edges. Next slide. And these are some of the edges, the upper slide, the sort of revised design where we are today, defining pedestrian places and spaces. And the lower slide showing where we were at DRC with a little bit more of an open area look. Next slide. More of the same area. This is an important aspect that we wanted to talk about tonight. So we're showing a lot of images of that, how to make that great people's space that still allows vehicular traffic. Next slide. Again, back to the site plan. I think this may be our last slide, but we're excited to bring this to you. It's something that we've envisioned for a long time. We're very excited to try to take this old suburban campus and continue to integrate it as a much more contemporary piece of urban design for the city. And we're excited to own it for a long time as well, and committed to delivering a really nice product, which I think we've already done in the first phase and looking forward to trying to do in the second phase. So we're happy to turn it back over to you for a discussion.
Thank you. So at this point, we'll open up for public comment. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Phone users can mute and unmute themselves with *6. EPC clerk will start the timer and let you know when your time is up. We'll do 3 minutes as Whitehall. So do we have any people interested in speaking?
Yes, we have 2 attendees wishing to speak. Let me go ahead and share the timer. Okay, and Bruce England, I will allow you to talk. So go ahead.
Thank you, Brittany. Yes, this is Bruce England speaking for Mountain View Coalition for Sustainable Planning and Green Spaces, Mountain View. So looking at the new plans compared with what you presented to DRC originally, really like the changes, a whole lot there. The site as it is right now is very encumbered by surface parking, a lot of hardscape, and I see that as still going to be a challenge going forward with the project. I see in your drawings that there's still a fair amount of surface parking, and we would like even more of that removed if possible and converted to landscaping. Other comments, in the office building, it appears that there's an awful lot of glass, even with the new design. I assume that that's been passed for bird friendliness, but that amount of glass could be a problem. And then a lot of light leakage too. We're hoping for new light ordinances in Mountain View that would reduce the amount of light. And so too many windows can be a problem in that respect. In the two buildings, we would like to see active design elements in those. So emphasizing stairways over elevators as much as possible. We would like to see the trees that you have in non-building footprint areas protected if possible. We're not sure why those are marked for removal. I mentioned reducing the amount of hardscape would be good. We're curious about the increased job count if the office building goes in, given that there's no housing on site here. Two more comments. One is consideration for public-facing amenities in the design, such as drinking fountains or hydration stations, restrooms, bike repair stations, public-facing. Be great. And lastly, consideration for shared workspace in your plans to promote work from home across companies in the region. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
And next we have, it's a phone number ending in 929. So I will allow you to talk now. Go ahead. Are you able to speak?
Good evening, commissioners. And Joe, that was a great, imagine I can't see it, I'm on the phone, but it was nice to listen to. My name is Brian Shields. I'm a field rep for Carpenters Local 405. And I just wanted to speak on this. It's another precise plan where language could be added to it that would allow apprenticeship, prevailing wage, healthcare for the people that actually do the building there. I just wanted to make that comment, and I hope that you all have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other speakers?
And no other members of the public currently wishing to speak.
All right, then we'll bring it back to the commission for questions and discussion. So first, open up for questions from commissioners, either staff or the applicant. We have Commissioner Hairmeyer.
Maybe a question for staff on the public safety. Question about the driveway, the RU. Is that something that's come up in conversations about emergency vehicle access?
So based on our discussion during DRC, the applicant mentioned that it might be needed by the fire department. We haven't circled back with the fire department. Have you, Joe, talked with the applicant, with the fire department regarding the driveway?
We haven't. I mean, we think it's, you know, important and beneficial to the building either way. Typically, the fire department wants access from two sides. The Ferry Morris frontage is full of very mature heritage trees, redwoods and oaks. And so and along with Eveline, makes it very difficult to serve the building from a fire department perspective from those two sides. So we think they're going to want to have two sides to work from and be able to have aerial apparatus there. So again, we haven't met with the fire department. It's not our driving or gating issue. We just think that it's likely that they're going to require it or really want it. We want it from functionality and frankly, from a real estate standpoint, we think the building's difficult to lease and operate without being able to get people there in a logical fashion and be able to service it with the kind of activities that happen at buildings today. And I'm thinking about, you know, rideshare, I'm thinking about delivery, thinking about vendors, visitors. I'm trying to imagine my own, you know, person driving to the site with an Eveline address, turning into the site and then turning right in the parking lot, getting to a dead end, having to make a 3-point turn to turn around, then have to drive all the way around the outside of the site to try to figure out where the building is. And I think that's just difficult from a daily operational standpoint. It's difficult for leasing. It's very difficult, just makes for bad real estate. So I think our approach is to be able to make as great a space as we can and we think that we can achieve it. This is done in lots of places very successfully. But we want to create a great space that is pedestrian dominant, but allows the kind of uses that we know are going to be needed by a piece of real estate like this. You know, because it's interesting here, as opposed to a Google campus or another corporate user campus, these are multi-tenant buildings. There are different tenants in all these buildings. And so they have to have their own services, their own identity, their own vendors, their own visitors coming. It's very different than a cohesive campus that's run by one owner user. And so that's the primary issue for us here. And we don't see it as a negative thing. We want to make it, you know, viable, vibrant real estate with a good site plan.
Thank you. And maybe one more follow-up question while I have you, Joe. I was struck in the staff report and by visiting the site that a third of the parking is still surface parking. Are there any future long-term plans for development in that? I know it's a wedge shape. It's a little unusual. Is that
and I could let the architects speak, but we've been collectively working on this for a long time. That eastern portion of the site where the surface parking would remain, and I appreciate Brian England's comments there. There are lots and lots of heritage trees that are in good shape, good heritage trees, coastal live oaks, et cetera, that dominate that end of the site. The parking lot where the building is located currently has many kind of sickly ash trees that I believe many of them qualify as heritage trees, but they're not in good shape. But from a constraint standpoint, to your question about getting rid of more surface parking, the geometry, as you mentioned, this sort of triangular shape, in addition to the number of very, very large coastal live oaks primarily, make that a very difficult location to get rid of surface parking. Could it go to open space? Sure, but we need to find the parking somewhere. I think we're already asking for a reduction in the parking ratio. We think it's prudent to go down from the original Ferry Morris precise plan. It's sort of these sort of, you know, older parking ratios that we've relied on over many years, and move to a much more rational, lower parking ratio. But we would have to get rid of more surface parking, reduce the parking ratios much more substantially to a place that I think is not market sustainable at this point.
But the long-term plan does not remain for development on that site for any kind of commercial use.
The eastern site where the surface parking, we have no plans for any future building or parking structure on that site, and feel like it's probably infeasible due to the heritage trees.
Okay.
And we think the heritage trees are important. You know, we'd love to utilize as much real estate as we can on the site, but we really don't think it's a good idea. And I don't know if the architects want to say anything to that effect, but it seems like although it looks like an opportunity in plan, I think it's not a real opportunity in 3 dimensions on the site, kind of environmentally, with what's there today.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dempsey.
Thank you. So I have a host of kind of small questions. So let me just get through them real quick. So the TDR is 125,000 square feet for this project. Is that correct? What is
correct?
How much money will be transferred over to the school district in exchange for that? What's that?
It's $130 a square foot. Maybe I shouldn't be answering the question, but it's $130 a square foot. It's over $16 million going to the school district.
So I want to understand a little bit more about the discussion between your folks and DRC about this about whether or not there should be this curb cut from Eveline into the site and down to the parking. What is somebody from DRC here that can kind of walk me through really quick about sort of why they wanted that to go away? Because I think I understand the applicant, why the applicant wants it to be there. Is there somebody from DRC that can talk about why they wanted to make it go away?
So the driveway cut has been removed from the second revision of the project. Right now we are talking about the driveway section that is between the new building and existing building. And the rationale is that the existing buildings, they are based on pedestrian access, and between all the buildings, you don't see any driveways or any location for the cars. So it's I can say 100% accessible with like walkability and pedestrian environment. And right now, the new building and the existing building is going to be separated by a driveway. And that's why I know the applicant is trying to make it more pedestrian friendly, but at the end, when a car is able to pass through, it will be a driveway. So I know by adding more active space and green space, they can enhance it. But as I said, when a car is able to pass through, it's again a driveway. So that's why the rationale was that we wanted this space to be more pedestrian friendly between the buildings and not having a car pass through that environment.
So if I could just add, there's also greater opportunity to preserve existing trees, both heritage and non-heritage, as well as add more landscaping and trees in that area by not having it be paved.
Is there any way to kind of back of the envelope quantify like how many trees you'd save if you kept this as a pedestrian walkway, how many you'd give up if you made it a road?
Maybe Ella, could you share that sheet that showed the trees?
Yeah, we might have a diagram as well.
Yeah, I just think it's an important trade-off question. If it's 3, I might feel differently than if it was 30.
It's
3.
I mean,
Currently we're talking about this area, the driveway between the new building and the existing building. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, I think it's 3 if I'm reading the diagram correctly, but I'm not sure.
3 heritage trees, and if we reduce the building footprint a little bit, we can maybe save more non-heritage trees as well in this area.
Well, I'll tell you what, instead of, because I have a few more questions I want to ask, and this is just a study session anyway, I just think that's an important thing to address next time about what that trade-off is. Because we love our trees here. I just think it's important to know exactly how many we're saving by making it harder for vendors to get to the parking lot.
Can I add, if it would be okay, if I can add to Ella's comments about the objectives? I think what's interesting to note here is that in the existing condition, all the buildings have vehicular access on 2 sides. And when we add this building, this new building only would have, in that condition without the driveway, vehicular access on 1 side. And so the diagram becomes different than it is today. We have a wonderfully pedestrian focused environment within all of the buildings today, but they all have the ability to be served by 2 sides by vehicular traffic for both usability, delivery, fire, all of the above. In the case where that driveway is not between those 2 buildings, this building only has 1-sided vehicular access, which we find to be problematic. So that's one condition that changes with the removal of that driveway.
Chair, I have one more question, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
I want to talk about bikes for a second, because I see that, and I've driven by there many, many times, and I know you're not very far from Stevens Creek, so you must have a lot of bikes coming off there and going across Eveline to get to the site. I imagine perhaps you'll have more if you build this building and you've got more people coming in. I'm actually curious to know, do you know anything about bike accidents on that road? I'm curious to know, like, is this something that happens frequently? Is it something that's never happened in 40 years? How dangerous is it for bicyclers now between the trail and your site?
Jerry, you're on mute.
No, you're on mute.
I don't think we don't have any information on that. Not that it isn't a problem. I just don't know it to be a problem, but we don't have any data at all. We do know that the site is currently used extensively by bicyclists. And I think a lot of that is last mile from Caltrain and VTA. But so each building has a robust, bicycle room and storage area that's actively used. And this building has one planned as well, including bike showers and bike lockers, et cetera. But I don't have any data on sort of accidents in the area coming off of Stevens Creek. But we could look into it. Maybe our property managers know a little bit more.
I would just be curious about that because I imagine you're going to have a fair number of bikes coming through, and from VTA, from the VTA side too. I'm just sort of curious to know how much thought has gone into that, and if you haven't spent much time thinking about it because it never happens there, that would be a great thing to learn. But I would, for future discussions, I'd be curious. And that's all.
We've only been focused on providing lots of bicycle provisions on site, so great storage and changing rooms and shower rooms and that sort of thing, but not safety offsite. I just don't have any information, but we'll be happy to look into it.
Okay. Other commissioner questions? Yeah. Just have a couple. Oh, Vice Chair Ian, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I was just curious. Mr. Newbar, you had mentioned that we're trying to have this campus be a little bit more urban, where we're going away from the suburban model, trying to be a little bit more in line with Mountain View sort of urban principles. It's sort of, in my mind, this spot is unique in that it's beautiful because of what you've done in phase one. I think you've been very successful in turning it into kind of like an urban park with buildings situated within. And I like what you were saying and where you were going with that. And my question was, if we're trying to, decrease the number of parking spots and go to a more walking, biking sort of situation, if it isn't for the potential fire issue, then it would seem that we would want to have it be more of a pedestrian sort of feel and get rid of the drive. I understand from a commercial sort of marketing standpoint for the building, you wanted a road and have easy access, but if we're trying to, on principle, decrease the car use, and we're requesting like lower parking numbers, and we're designing a beautiful campus to increase parking and biking, couldn't we, if it's just for rideshare, just have a few spots like on a widened road that allowed for rideshare cars to park nearby and not necessarily have an entire driveway going between the buildings? Is that something that you guys thought about or would think about?
Yeah, of course. And we own and operate lots of buildings and are keen on how things work on site. And I think it's much less about the daily user. I don't think the daily user really wants to drive on this driveway to get to the parking structure. I think the typical user is going to find the shortest path in, and they know where they're going because they go there every day. Mm-hmm. It's really the vendors and visitors and deliveries that differ based on who occupies the building. Different tenants have different uses, different demands, and so forth. And you want to be able to offer a building that functions well for multiple types of tenants. But again, it's not really the parking ratio and the amount of single occupant vehicles that arrive on the site isn't really the driver for this convenience, if you will. Mm-hmm. It's actually not very convenient to get to the parking structure that way for a daily user. You'll naturally want to drive slower. You're naturally going to be aware of the quickest way in and so forth. So it's really the other aspects which are hard to define when you don't have a user in tow. And we need to have that flexibility to provide different types of uses. There could be 2 tenants in this building. There could be 3 tenants in this building based on tenant size. There could be a tenant on each floor with different uses and different needs, and different amounts of vendors, different amounts of visitors. Some tenants don't have a lot of visitors, but we don't know that ahead of time. So we need to provide that flexibility and that sort of logical way of finding a building. It sort of gets down to you put into Waze or Google Maps, 301 East Eveline Avenue, and it takes you down Eveline, and you turn into the driveway where it shows you where to go, and then you have no idea how to get to the building. And you actually turn towards the building, and then it's a dead end, and then you're having to do a 3-point turn to turn around and refigure out your bearings. It just doesn't make a lot of logical sense from our perspective. Again, we're building real estate, we're investing in real estate, we're thinking about it on that level. Having said that, we're clearly committed to creating great people places, and we've been doing that thus far, but we need to balance the two. It needs to work as real estate, and it needs to be great for people. And we think that what we're showing this plan actually achieves that very nicely. And we think we're approaching it in a pretty sensitive way to try to balance those two needs, which are really different programmatic needs, but they're both very important needs.
Okay, so it's not for the daily user or the people working there, because they'll know how to get to the building. I agree.
Yeah, maybe some.
It's
right.
more the vendors, the ride share, and delivery is why you're really gunning for this access.
Right.
And well,
I would call it functionality of an office building.
Yeah. How would you imagine that 351 would be accessed for those people? Because building 351 is the one closest to the parking garage, and that's an existing building. Have people had any issues finding that one? Does that have an Eveline address? I'm assuming
they all have Eveline addresses, yeah.
Have you had any issues with tenants in that building?
I don't think so, because currently we have a continuous loop through the site.
Mm-hmm.
So right now you can enter anywhere and circle around all of the buildings very easily. In this proposed revision by the DRC, you can't actually make that final link of the loop. The final link of the loop is removed. So if you make the wrong turn and turn right off of Eveline Avenue when you come in, you're stuck. You have no way of figuring out how to get to that building without driving all the way around and passing the parking structure, and then you get visibility of the building. At this point today, if you pull into the site, it doesn't matter which way you enter the site, it's a continuous loop. We just don't want to cut off the loop. We don't want to be able to disorient users and visitors by not having a continual way to get to the building. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to us.
Okay, I guess I'm just a little confused, because they would come off Eveline, hit the parking garage, but I thought, and tell me if I'm wrong, that there is a road that goes in front of the parking garage and goes all the way to what I thought was the entry of the building. And then you make, it's the entry plaza is right where the road turns. Correct. Off of Ferry.
It's connected to one road. One entry drive goes by the building.
Okay, so you could actually, you would make a loop and you just get back onto Ferry Morrison, then go back onto East Eveline and come back in again. But you're going to
force people to exit the site and drive around on the city street and re-enter the site again. That's what we're trying to avoid, is this sort of disoriented thing where you really can't logically, 50% of the people can't logically find the building the first time they try to get there.
Okay, I just want to be clear what your reasoning was for it. It's not for the daily user, it's for the vendors, and you're worried that they won't be able to find it.
Correct.
Road going between 311 and 301.
Right. Our solution is not less expensive. There's no advantageous thing for us to do this. We want a site plan that actually works really well for both vehicular access and pedestrians. There's not some sort of sleight of hand here. We're trying to make the right site plan that works.
I understand. It's just, I just wanted to know.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Other questions? I have a few. In your drawings, all the services area on the first floor on the south side of the building next to the entrance to Ferry Morris Drive. Why don't you think that vendors can't be trained to use the entrance that they're supposed to use to get to the loading dock and the services area on the south end of the building?
I think vendors could be trained, although the drivers tend to change a lot, and the types of vendors that show up, whether they be vendors could be delivery people that deliver, supplies. They could also be salespeople that are visiting the building for the first time, trying to sell new software to this company or whatever. So it's business vendors as well as the repeat vendors. So people that bring cleaning supplies that come every other week, they'll know the drill. But the other vendors that service businesses will change constantly.
So people like salespeople, they're going to be visitors to the site. Or would they be prohibited from using the visitor parking that's right in front of the building that's next to the new building, right there along Eveline? Was there a reason that they would not be able to park in that parking lot?
Well, that parking right now is accessible ADA parking serving the 301 building.
I guess I didn't notice that 100% if it was that way when I drove around it.
It's
Okay.
not 100%, but almost 100%. It's accessible parking plus expectant mother parking, et cetera. That's there adjacent towards the front door of 301.
And a question for staff. I've lived in areas where there is no there's no road next to a building, and fire services required were handled through the use of essentially under grass blocks that allowed the support of the fire services. Is there any reason that on an office building that kind of access for emergency services could not be provided on that area in between the two buildings?
So I think it would take some more analysis with the fire department. They have a 150-foot reach distance from a paved area. So it would, I mean, to answer the direct question, they don't allow grasscrete, so that wouldn't be an option. But we would have to do kind of a distance reach analysis from the other different paved areas to see if fire access was adequate without that driveway.
A couple times, Mr. Nupar has mentioned an Eveline address. Is there a particular reason that an Eveline address is required for the new building as opposed to a Ferry Morris Way address?
I don't have intimate knowledge of how the addressing works. This campus is known as 301 to 381 East Eveline Avenue. And it's proposed that this building, similar to the other buildings, will take a 3 series address within that cluster so that it's all part of the same campus, as opposed to a unique address on a different street like you might find on different city blocks, for example. So we think it's should be cohesive, but I don't know what the addressing or postal address controls are. But we think from a real estate standpoint, we would want for the let's say one of the existing tenants wants to move into this new building, that they have similar address and identity and so forth. So there's value to the campus identity, but I don't know what goes into changing addresses or creating new addresses in a city on a street that doesn't currently have any addresses.
Stephanie?
Yeah, the addressing is done by our building official in conjunction with the post office. So I know there's a lot of kind of different rules, if this, then that. So I really wouldn't be able to tell you if they could, readdress the site or this building with a Ferry Morris address versus Eveline.
And then on the questions regarding the changing the zoning, I couldn't figure out on the table on page 5 how. So I stared at the plot site plans. I couldn't figure out how the new site has 70% landscape and the current site is 50% landscaping. It was not apparent to me how that math works.
So the requirement of the precise plan is to provide 50% landscaping within that 70 feet yards. And the applicant is proposing to increase that amount by increasing the amount of the landscaping and trees and all of that to 70%. So meaning that 70% of that required 70 feet yard would be landscaped.
And so it's the frontage only?
So as you can see, there is a requirement along East Eveline at the front, and then also along Ferry Morris, based on the precise plan. And the applicant is willing to increase that the amount of landscaping.
Okay, so it's not site-wide, it's the area in that area along Ferry Morris and the area along Eveline.
Yes.
Definitely
within the yards, yeah.
Okay. The net effect of 70% landscaping over 55 to 70 yards versus 50% landscaping over 70 yards, does the total landscaping go up or down as proposed along the frontage?
It goes up because the building is encroaching in some areas and not in all of the frontage or on all along the frameworks. In some areas, the building encroaches into the required yard, but in other areas, sometimes the setback is even more than 70 feet. So, but the applicant is increasing the amount of landscaping based on. So if you look at the area, that 70 feet yard, the applicant is landscaping about 70% of that area without looking at the building encroaching or not. So just looking at the site plan, 70 feet, and then it's going to be 70% landscaped.
And then it was not clear to me from the drawings. There's a basketball, like a half basketball court and a sand volleyball court in the back near where the parking garage is. It's not clear from the drawings whether they would be destroyed as part of the placement of the parking garage or relocated, or would they still be, they're kind of, at the very best, looks like they'd be kind of in the center of where the parking garage is.
Correct.
So their accessibility is challenged, I think.
They would be removed as part of the project. In the current site work project, we've added a new bocce court in the center of the site as a preemptive move to provide, active kind of participatory outdoor activities in lieu of the basketball and volleyball going away.
All right, those were my questions. Vice Chair Yin.
One very quick one this time. Does the property owner control the landscaping along Eveline as well?
Yes, up to the public right of way. Yeah.
Okay. So the sidewalk also that is sort of wiggling around in front of the new building, under those big giant pine trees. It goes all the way.
Yeah, redwoods. Richard Crockett, our landscape architect, may be on the call. I don't know if he has the ability to participate, but I honestly don't remember if this public right-of-way is at the back of the sidewalk or at the inside edge of the sidewalk.
Okay.
So I don't remember exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Nees?
Question for the developer. Aside from standard industry best practices and whatnot, what steps are you guys taking to make this a very water efficient development?
Oh, great. I'd love to have my architect speak. I've been handling the lion's share of the action here. Right. Do you want to talk about water efficiency on the project and how that's being addressed?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's been mentioned earlier that we've been adding 70% landscaping in the frontal zones. A big part of why that's happening is because we're removing so much surface parking, which is not great from a stormwater management, and certainly not following current C3 regulations on that. So it's an opportunity to distribute retention basins throughout the site. And a site like this, 17 acres, that's quite a lot of area. So that's where you're seeing some of these new landscaped areas are actually functional landscapes for stormwater management and water efficiency. I think obviously drought tolerant planting. A lot of the heritage trees, since they're so well established, they don't require irrigation. So that's a big part of it. And of course, the buildings themselves are energy efficient and low water consuming, and we're attempting to hit a LEED Gold standard for the site, including the new building.
Yeah, I would add that, as Wright touched on a little bit on the existing site work that we've done, we've removed all of the, at least on the inboard portion of the project, we've removed all of the irrigated turf grass. There was a ton. The dominant landscape feature prior to our project starting was irrigated turf grass, and we've removed all of that And I think even along the sidewalks, it's gone as well. And so the site is currently using a lot less water than it had been. And these buildings obviously will be state of the art in terms of their sustainability. Not to the water question, but just for context, we're also, this building will be all electric and not use any natural gas either.
So in terms of the, that, I think what you call it, that grass, you know, there's this new term like non-functional. Is it fair to say then, can you guys confirm that you have eliminated all use of non-functional grass from this project? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's fair to say. The one area, we have a sort of a quad in the middle of the site that looks like grass, but it's artificial turf, and it's actually below it is a massive stormwater retention basin that helps manage the runoff from the site and the rooftops into bioretention filters and naturally flow back into the water table.
How much of the project's landscaping is non-functional?
Oh, I don't know how to answer that question. Again, I don't know if our landscape architect is on or not. Non-functional, it's very little.
Non-functional, you know, in terms of, you know, landscape, we have hardscape and softscape areas. The majority of the project, the phase 1 project, is functional hardscape areas, and the lawn Joe mentioned. So very, very function oriented and drought tolerant plantings with a lot of native plants, and that will kind of continue in the phase 2 project, the new building project.
Yeah, most non-paved areas on our project are covered with rock, pebble, gravel, mulch.
Cool. And is it fair to assume or safe to say that you guys are gonna kind of keep reviewing that? And essentially, you know, because it would be good, obviously, you guys live in the state as well, I presume, unless you're contracted out of state.
Yes.
And so it would be great to kind of like just lead on that. And I know there's cities like Las Vegas, you know, comes to mind that are doing a really good job with the landscaping. And yeah, it'd be nice to drink the water. So
yeah, agreed. And frankly, you know, one of the things that we've struggled with is that this site has a number of large redwood trees on the site, but redwood trees are very thirsty, and you can't put non-potable water on redwood trees. They'll burn out and die. And so we're struggling with, you know, having to throw water on underneath the redwood trees, even though we don't want to be irrigating that landscape. But the trees are so valuable and they're so good at carbon sequestration that we want them there, but it's just one of those conundrums of water use.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot.
Okay, any other questions before I move to staff questions? Okay. So the first question from staff was whether the EPC generally supports the changes to the precise plan amendments. Exact wording here. So does EPC support the proposed amendments to the precise plan? Yes, support. I see nod from Commissioner Nunez, a nod from Commissioner Clark, Mr. Dempsey, Vice Chair Yin. So it looks like there's 6 votes in favor of the precise plan proposed amendments. Good. Second question was, does the EPC support the staff recommendation? Oh, did you have a comment on that, or is it on the next topic?
No, I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed reading a precise plan from 1985. Thank you for that. The language was very modern. I enjoyed it. So thanks to staff.
They're much more brief than today's precise plans.
Commissioner Clark?
It's on the next question. On the... When you're ready to move.
So I appreciate your enthusiasm. So does the EPC support the staff and DRC recommendations for the site design renovations, including prioritizing pedestrian access and amenity space? Commissioner Clark.
So I do support the staff recommendation, but I wanted to provide comment on the driveway we've all talked about. So normally in a campus-like setting with a in a couple of situations, I would feel pretty strongly about a vehicular access not being there. Those are typically campus settings where you have a single tenant and folks need to get between buildings frequently, and you don't necessarily want you want as few conflicts as possible with vehicles as you can have. And the other is if you're trying to break down a block and have the ability for folks to get from one side of the block to the other, transiting through the site, which in this case we don't have here. We sort of have an island, and it's going to be we don't have necessarily a single tenant, and we have probably a multi-tenant situation with folks arriving at different addresses and things, as the applicant pointed out. And so in this particular case, I actually don't feel strongly that the driveway needs to not be there. I actually think it's important to have some level of vehicular access, having experienced this in my own work, especially for deliveries vendors and folks who, yes, you'll have your regular ones who know exactly how to get in and out. But it's very difficult if you happen to be the tenant or tenants in that building and not the others, and you're running into a lot of difficulties that may not be necessary. And so, just given that this isn't a single tenant, a cohesive campus where folks are going to be going from building to building really frequently, most likely. I know it's possible, but I think it's unlikely. And then the fact that staff is also exploring, it sounds like, ways to ensure that this isn't a heavily vehicular trafficked site. It's primarily pedestrian and bikes, which happens to have a few vehicles coming through every now and then. If that's the case, then I'm actually okay with having vehicular access to the building as the applicants proposed. And I think the trade-off with a couple of trees, I actually care more about the heritage trees generally, but also especially the taller trees around the perimeter of the site, because I think they provide screening for the neighbors. And while it's great to maintain as much internal landscape as you can, I think over time, native species there will be more valuable than what's there today. So that's a long way of saying I support staff and the DRC's recommendations for the site redesign revision and prioritizing pedestrian access and amenity space, but I actually don't feel strongly that the driveway itself needs to be removed, as long as it doesn't become as long as it isn't just a paved thing that you can freely drive down with no speed bumps or considerations for bicyclists and pedestrians in that area.
Mr. Dempsey?
I thought Chris said it really well. I also do not feel that we need to close off that vehicular access. I think as long as the applicant can show that they put a substantial amount of thought into safety design and like putting this together in a way that you're not going to have a problem with, engineer looking at his phone who just walks, not at the crosswalk, but halfway across the street and get plowed. Like, I do not want that. None of us do. So I'd like there to be, from the applicant, some deep thought about how to make that really, really safe. But we want these campuses to be beautiful. We want to enjoy being in them, but we also have to enjoy using them. And if you go and you visit and you get lost, you get drive around for 15 minutes and it's frustrating. That's not fun either. And yeah, so that's not a part that I think needs to be here.
Commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner Vice Chair.
Thanks. I'd say in general, my personal preference is for it to be more pedestrian. So if we're going to, I know we can't make a decision because we're not making a decision, but even for myself, it's hard to say. It depends on the fire access. If that we don't know yet, then we don't know it. But if there is a way still, I would still side for pedestrian access. If it could just be a one-way street and you're not looping through then Ferris Moore, East Evelyn to come back in, I'm just conceptually trying to prioritize the pedestrian access. So to minimize the amount of, drivable space that has a curb cut would be ideal to me. And then that way you can get a little bit more landscaping. I'm just pushing for that direction, even if we have to have vehicular access. We're only saving, a few trees, so it's not the biggest thing for me either. But if I were, I would still lean towards pedestrian access. Just looking at, I think in the packet, which page is this? L2, the landscape sheet 2. You've got this big, strong axis going left to right on the page between buildings 301, 351, 331, just like between front to back. And it would be nice to connect that all the way to the new building, where now it looks like it's broken with the road. So if conceptually the design is to carry it all the way through and bring it into the plaza as if it were all tied together, I think it would be stronger, even if we do have vehicular access. I would also, it would be great to see some more plantings along East Eveline. I noticed that it actually is very well walked, and it's a pretty comfortable walk, except that most of the trees are on the north side. Some of the very large trees provide canopy while you're walking, but it would be great to get some shade in the afternoon if you're walking, to have some more trees on the south side. And I know you've done a great job. It looks gorgeous, all of this landscaping in the campus. But if we want to sort of have a street presence and to kind of speak to the public, then maybe we have, a couple things. Throw the dog a bone over there to the public and have a little bit more along Eveline as well to give more of a face to that building too. Maybe a place to rest, some shade, things of that nature. Thanks.
Commissioner Nunez?
Yep. So I'm really curious about Commissioner Yin's comments, and I was hoping staff might, or the developer might be able to pull up that page. And then Commissioner Yin, if you wouldn't mind just kind of visualizing a little bit, I would actually appreciate that. Sorry to ask you to repeat that again, but I'm very curious about that comment you just made visually.
I think we can pull up that page. You're talking about the east-west connection, not the street trees.
Yeah, the first part of my comment was the east-west connection of the pedestrian way. See that you've created this strong east-west connection between the sort of the crab claws and the crab back. I'm sorry, that's the what I've got in my head. Right, exactly. And you've got a nice plaza where the new building is, but it doesn't look like it's connected visually in this plan. You still see sort of this break for a road, and it would be nice if conceptually it all tied through where that was the strongest concept. And if you had to have a road, make it as small as possible and have it disappear in a sense. Let the people and the bikes have the priority over the car. Every time there's
a good comment.
Sorry, my hand
is good comment.
Yeah, I would support that as well. Thanks, Commissioner Yin, and thanks, Joe. Yeah, I would support that.
Can I just make a comment on the street trees real quick? It's a great comment you made about the street trees. Are at the top of the page there. They are existing redwoods at the back of curb. Our original plans for phase 1 showed a double row of trees there, and I can't remember what happened, but at some point our double row was reduced to just maintaining the existing row of redwoods. So that's what we have to date. But we were always interested in having a second row of trees there. So if it's something we want to consider downstream with staff, we can probably look at that.
And I know there's some bioretention, and you're making use of some of those zones. It's just, for the people walking down the street, it would be, sidewalk. It would be nice to have some shade, maybe some respite spots, a couple amenities. It's a long stretch. And, it would just be a plus if some effort was put on the Eveline street frontage as well. Thanks.
So, Commissioner Nunez, did you have other comments on this question? Oh, okay. Can we go back to we're gonna find everybody here. Heard from everybody except for me. So in general, I support the emphasis on pedestrian access and the amenity space. I am I'm actually intrigued by Commissioner Yin's comment about making it one way. One of the things that I thought was, we haven't really talked about, but I thought was extremely important from the DRC feedback was wayfinding strategies. That can make a big difference in how people get around, how they find the site, and particularly tell vendors no deliveries this way kind of thing. So I completely agree with DRC's feedback on that. You know, I guess I'd like that if the driveway is still there, it's the exception on how people go through the site as opposed to the rule. And so some of the things you showed in your drawings head down that path. I'd like to, you know, certainly work with staff to move that further. Obviously, it needs to have fire access, and if it can't be grass blocked, then they have to be paved no matter what. But I'm not, like Commissioner Clark, I'm not stuck on it having to be eliminated. But I want it to. It should be something that's more of an exception for what people use, as opposed to the rule. And I guess I think I'm hearing that from across all the commissioners in general. I didn't get any other kind of major points. I think Commissioner Yin was talking about doing some more along that, making bike access into that area. Commissioner Nunez mentioned that. I would certainly support, you know, making sure that bike access is also strong in that area. Are there other? So that's 3. Are there other commissioners that want to make sure that bike access in there is also as important as pedestrian access, or is it just give us? I see Commissioner Dempsey, Haymeyer, Commissioner Clark. Oh, okay, so bike should be part of that as well. Okay, so I think we have consensus on this item. But read staff, Ella and Stephanie. All right, next item is question 3, is does the EPC support the staff and DRC design recommendations or have any comments on the proposed design of the office building or the parking garage? Commissioner Clark.
If it's okay, I'm going to have to shift devices just because my laptop's dying. So I should be fine to continue participating. I just wanted to make sure, if it's okay, I'll just briefly comment on 3 and 4 just in case. So 3, I do support the staff and DRC building design recommendation, especially the 3 points there at the end of the staff report right before the questioning comes up. I guess this is actually part of question 1, but I would generally support anything that we can do to preserve additional trees, even if that means we've already gone past question 1, but even if it meant maybe going a little taller on a couple of these structures, just given the amount of redwoods and the screening that's there, I think preserving the trees is more important in this particular area than height. But I'm fine with what's proposed, and and I'm hoping that basically what staff and the DRC are proposing here will allow us to just create a better overall design, which it sounds like it will. And I'm encouraged by the before and after visuals that the applicant showed. I think it's made a lot of progress. And then on question 4, I do support studying any changes that we can, especially the minor ones, to the building garage footprints and paving to preserve additional trees. I think that's a no-brainer. So in short, I'm supportive of both of the staff recommendations on 3 and 4.
Other commissioners on question 3? Supporting of the design, not support of the design changes. Commissioner Dempsey.
Yeah, I'm totally in support of this. I think that it makes a lot of sense. The only thing I would add is, I think it was Richard suggested, hydration stations. So when you're looking at amenities to make outdoor spaces more hospitable and useful, consider hydration stations. I think that's a great idea. People need to drink more water, and that can be useful to like a lot of different people.
Vice Chair Yin.
Oh, I do. I agree. I think, from what used to be there to what is there now is an improvement. And I would imagine from what was at the first meeting to the second meeting has improved. If there's any other improvement that DRC finds, I would think that it would be going in the right direction. And I feel like the developer is also trying to get there as well. So it wouldn't be difficult to get to a really nice final design. So I'm happy with the direction it's going. Anytime we can save trees, all the better. So yes, I'm in support.
Other commissioners, Commissioner Hammeyer.
Similarly, I appreciated the thought. I think even though this garage doesn't get a ton of visibility given the screening, I think the DRC recommendations on design are important. I appreciate the effort for LEED Gold and the rooftop solar. I didn't have time to research this before the meeting, and I don't know what our standards are for EV chargers on new garages that are coming up, but being able to really encourage that infrastructure when you have this investment opportunity, particularly with the rooftop solar, it seems like that would be a consideration down the line. But that's all.
Commissioner Haynes?
I mean, I'm
supported.
Yeah,
kicking your head up.
I have no I have no objections. Is my shaking?
Okay, so neutral. And then in general, I'm supportive of the DRC's feedback. I would Commissioner Hayemeyer's comment. While not as many people are going to see the parking garage, the first design really was kind of ugly. And doing something, it doesn't have to be an icon, or what was it doesn't have to be an iconic building like we've had in some areas, but something to make it a little less just there would be good. I think we're focusing kind of on the exterior items at this point. Certainly, whether they're active spaces inside or outside. I think that's, if we're going to have something that's going to be fairly close to transit. I don't think a lot of people realize that just to the east, the Flower Mart project is getting close to being finished, and so we're probably going to have even more residents coming down Eveline. So anything on the exterior there that makes it easy for, it makes it attractive for people that are riding their bike or walking down Eveline. That's a pretty big project, and so there's going to be a lot of additional residents just down the street, and hopefully some of them decide to live there and work here, so they don't have to drive anywhere. But I think generally I'm supportive of the DRC's recommendations on that. And then, so it looks like I heard kind of 5 in support and 1 kind of neutral. So that would be in favor of the DRC recommendations on the design. And then on the last question is the trees. Does the EPC support studying minor changes to building and garage footprints, proposed paving, landscape to preserve trees identified by staff, or have any additional comments on proposed tree removal and planting plants? Would like to go first. Commissioner Clark already said he supports, saving the trees. So we've got kind of one vote there. Vice Chair Yin.
Sure. I just had a quick clarification question. Now, was there something we were comparing it to? Like an option that there wasn't anything that I saw where we saw an alternative that saved more trees, or so I'm not sure what the recommendations were and what those changes were. So it's hard to, say yes or no.
So at this time, we don't have a recommendation, but if you look at the site plan, you see some of the trees that are proposed to be removed are not even within the proposed building footprints. And also there are some opportunities in the plaza area, the proposed plaza and the area between the proposed office building and the parking garage to save more trees by the landscape design.
I understand. So, it's not just the parking garage itself, the structure. Okay, thank you.
And also just they can relocate the heritage trees that are in good condition within the site. So that was another suggestion. So.
Yeah, I think that's a no-brainer. Also, if there's a potential to do so, let's do it. It takes many, many years to grow a tree. I know it's difficult with a big root ball, you have to dig way down and sometimes you damage the tree. If there's an effort to do some of the higher quality ones, I think that would be great. If there's something in the landscape that can be done to retain a tree, if it doesn't need to be cut down to build these two structures, for sure, let's look at that. Yeah, and I think for sure, I would be in support of that.
Commissioner Dempsey?
I would be in support. I think DRC's right. And if we can save a few more trees with a little bit more study, let's do it.
Commissioner Nunez?
Yeah, so I don't know, like, if this question would be better for like staff or the developer. I'll ask anyway. This might be part of the like environmental impact stuff. But I really am curious here around like the carbon budget in terms of like this project. I know trees are nice and fun, and like I might like, be going into sacrilege here, but in terms of like the carbon impacts of like, and the water impacts of preserving the trees versus like doing something more efficient than having the trees, I guess my question is like, to what extent is like carbon and water utilization measured as part of this process? My inclination is that yes, it's good to save the trees and the redwoods, and it's gonna, obviously the carbon sequestration aspect is critical. So I'm not like saying I don't support that, but I do want to know like how much is the carbon and water utilization, that like resource utilization of yes, keeping trees and like to the point of not being able to use something like recyclable water, versus like replacing the trees and doing something more efficient. Like, is there some comparison that goes into this review? I'd be, if I'm missing it in all the technical jargon in these reports, then moving forward, I can definitely look at it a lot more. But I am curious what the balance is versus trees now or not trees in the future.
Does staff review that? Ella?
So much like many topics, there are, competing interests. There's arborist reports and other reports don't specifically analyze carbon sequestration versus, water use and balancing all of those. It's something that's kind of done more on a qualitative basis. In general, we want to, re-tree sites with native trees. They naturally have less water use and support really the kind of are supported by kind of the area's climate and our biodiversity goals. But there's not any specific reports that talk specifically about those, comparing those different metrics.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, I'll support the tree question, but it is an open question for me, and maybe I don't know if like I could follow up with like Eric or someone else in staff and get information around, like actually thinking, or not that people aren't thinking about it, or where I can get the latest thinking on the actual like resource intensiveness of kind of just trying to preserve something we have today versus like maybe even 10 years from now, it really wouldn't be the most effective thing, and we've locked ourselves into that. Like I'm just very, I would like to maybe if there's someone here like that could raise their hand and I could follow up with them on that, like who would be the best person?
Yeah, I just could reach out to Eric and.
Yeah. Is that right, Eric?
Yeah, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. We can talk offline.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, then I mean, I'll support it as is with the information available.
So I would very much like to see if we could preserve for some of them. The ones that are really, really close to the building footprint, I understood more, but there are 3 trees to the east of the parking garage, and then there's a cluster of trees that's kind of in the parking lot that are not anywhere close to them. And that DRC mentioned something about potentially reconfiguring the Ferry-Morris entrance if we could avoid. It looked like there was at least 3 heritage trees there, and then a bunch of non-heritage trees that could potentially be saved simply by reconfiguring that entrance from being straight in to maybe curve down towards the parking garage. It would be great. Staff didn't ask specifically about how we feel about the applicant's recommendation to only plant 94 trees versus the required 138. Are you looking for our feedback on that as well, Ella and Stephanie, or it wasn't called as a separate element of that question? Big difference.
I guess that's a requirement. So they are required to provide 138 based on the proposed removal of the trees.
Okay. Good. So it sounds like we have consensus on any tweaks we can do to try to preserve as many of the trees as we can, particularly the heritage trees, as supported by EPC. I think we've covered the 4 questions. Stephanie, you have what you need from us?
I think you do. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So with that, we will close this item and move on to. And so, thank you, staff. Thank you, Joe and team, for your time here. And
thank you.
Look forward to seeing you next time.
Great comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to item number 6, commission staff announcements, updates, requests, and committee report. Any announcements from staff or commissioners?
Thank you, Chair Cranston. Not very many announcements. Just a reminder that the council is going to be reviewing the draft housing element on June 14th. And after that, we're going to be sending it into HCD for their review. It'll come back to the EPC in the fall for adoption after HCD is reviewed. There is a August 3rd meeting. It's going to be a special meeting in order to review the housing element environmental impact report. So that document will come out shortly beforehand, and this will be the opportunity for public input on the environmental review, as well as planning commissioner input. And then there are no items scheduled for June 15th, which was going to be the last regular meeting of the season. So after that, we are adjourned for the summer.
Kristen, how far in advance of that meeting will the draft EIR be available?
I don't have those exact dates with me right now, but we will certainly send out emails to the commission with plenty of heads up about those dates. Certainly, we will provide it, more than just the normal weekend review. We know it'll be quite a bit to review, so we know it'll be at least an extra week. But we'll give you a heads up about that.
Trying to digest an entire EAR in a weekend is challenge. Commissioner Hayman.
Eric, do we have a meeting tentatively scheduled for August 17th, or would we go back on recess and then reconvene over Labor Day? What does the fall look like?
Yeah, there is a regular meeting scheduled for the 17th. So that is a regularly scheduled meeting.
Vice Chair.
Quick question. It just came to me earlier. we have a lot of projects where they say they do TDM studies. I was wondering if we ever get feedback on that, and if one day maybe we could see how things are going with those studies to see how our projects are progressing in that realm. They're working.
I would welcome that as well.
Yeah, I mean, if there's general commission support for bringing back that information, we can either do a brief summary of that at a future just kind of announcements, or we are planning to start an update of the Transportation Demand Management Ordinance, or a new Transportation Demand Management Ordinance. And so there may be an opportunity to provide more information during a study session or something like that on that. So we can, I'll note the request, I'll see what's available. And if there's a small bucket of information that I can provide during announcements, then I can put that together for you.
Oh, sure. And if it's more efficient to wait for the TDM ordinance, by all means, whatever works for you guys. I just wanted to see if it was possible for us to get some feedback to find out, how things are going, given that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, I will say one of the challenges, not to get into too many details right now, but most of the reports that we've had over the last 2.5 years have been nobody's coming into the office. Right. So there's not much to report, at least recently, but I will mention, though, this may be of interest to you. Council on the 28th is going to be reviewing a consent item regarding the North Bay Shore trip counts. So that is going to have a lot of data around, mode share into North Bay Shore and other information that you might be interested in.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Any other announcements?
No, not for me.
We will close the June 1st meeting of the Environmental Planning Commission. Our next meeting will be held on August 3rd at 7 p.m. Thank you, everyone, and have a great summer.
You guys too.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Everyone.